Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Canada's federal party leaders make one final pitch to Canadians as voters head to the polls. The Alberta government's new restrictions exemption program is underway. We will explain what that will mean for you. And the annual Terry Fox Run took place over the weekend, but there was a bit of a twist with this year's event.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Today is Election Day, a day when Canadians go to the polls to elect a new federal government. Will Liberal leader Justin Trudeau get his majority? What kind of an impact will Maxime Bernier and the PPC have on the outcome? Will we see Erin O'Toole become the new Prime Minister? Conservative leader O'Toole says his party is the one which will truly fight for Canadians.
Fight for seniors who are falling behind with the cost of living crisis. Fight for small businesses who've been left out, particularly by the Trudeau government. Hospitality, services, tourism. Small business owners here in the Markham and the GTA area holding on by a thread. They don't need more of the same from Mr. Trudeau. More debt, more higher taxes, more scandals, more cover-ups. What they need are fighters.
NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, meanwhile, says his party is the one which best offers hope for Canadians.
We have spoken with so many people across this country who come up to us on a regular basis and say, thank you for giving us hope. And these are people that are feeling a little desperate because they're not sure if the Liberals are going to do what it takes to fight the climate crisis, and they see in us a commitment to make sure we create those good jobs and fight the climate crisis, and we give them hope. And that, to me, is such an incredible thing to do, to give people hope.
Liberal leader Justin Trudeau maintains that his party is the only party of choice for progressives.
Right now, progressives don't have to choose between the party that can stop Erin O'Toole from forming government and the party that has the best, most ambitious, progressive plan for this country, because the answers to both of those questions is the Liberal Party of Canada. So if you want $10 a day childcare and support for families to be able to buy their new homes, go out and vote Liberal.
Lethbridge Conservative candidate Rachel Harder also made one last plea to constituents earlier today.
Today is Election Day, and I am here at the campaign office with a ton of incredible volunteers who are working extremely hard to get out the vote today. Yes, that's right. Every single vote matters in this election. It is the most important in a generation, and we are counting on you getting to the polls. Bring your family, bring your friends, encourage everyone to cast a ballot. And of course, here in Lethbridge, vote smarter, vote harder. Polls are open until 7:30 p.m. today. If you need any assistance, please don't hesitate to call.
Voters in Lethbridge made their way to the polls today to cast their ballots. Now, there are just under 89,000 registered voters in our city, with around 20% voting in the advanced polls. Carson Marsouk has the details on what voters could expect when heading out to the polls today.
Today is the 44th general election in Canada, and a few changes have been made to polling stations to help deal with COVID-19. In Alberta, masks are mandatory in all indoor buildings, physical distancing has been put in place, and each polling station chosen has the requirements for anyone to access. Voting in the federal election gives every Canadian citizen the chance to choose what the future holds.
You need to have your say in the way our government is run, and I think it's really important. You can't complain about things if you don't make an effort to vote for who you think will be serving your best interest.
In Lethbridge, voter turnouts for the young demographics have been lower, with those voting on Monday encouraging everyone to do their research ahead of voting.
We need to try and educate ourselves more. I feel like our generation don't really care about politics and stuff, but you just need to kind of follow it on the news and watch the debates and be able to make your own opinions so that you can make those choices.
With the ongoing pandemic, there are no polls set up in schools this year, leaving some residents having to travel across the city. About half a dozen Westsiders had to travel to the exhibition park, while the remaining half were able to vote at the ATB Centre. There were 18,248 voters who cast their vote in advance. That's up by just under 2,000 in 2019. However, mail-in ballots won't be counted until Tuesday, meaning the final results could change after then. In a statement from Elections Canada, it reads in part, whether returned in person, by mail, or put in special boxes at polling stations, all are brought back to the returning office. They will not be counted on Election Day. On Tuesday morning, the process to start the count will begin. If you haven't voted today, you do still have a little bit of time. Polls in Alberta close at 7:30 p.m. For Bridge City News, I'm Carson Marsouk.
The Alberta government announced today that the restrictions exemption program is underway. This allows fully vaccinated Albertans or those with a recent negative COVID-19 test to access participating businesses and events across the province. Premier Jason Kenney had opposed a vaccine passport over what he said were privacy concerns, but said last week it's become necessary to protect Alberta's hospitals that face the prospect of being overwhelmed in the pandemic's fourth waves. Some Albertans say they were easily able to edit the proof of vaccination cards that the province made available for download. Dan Sugar says the card was in a PDF file, which he says was easily able to edit, and changing his name to Facus McFakeface, and that he received doses of ivermectin horsey paste. A spokesperson with the Health Ministry said a motivated individual can edit the PDF, but that work continues on a more secure QR code that will be available in the coming weeks. A number of Canadians are not happy with being forced to get the jab or potentially lose their jobs. Carol Crossan is a constitutional lawyer based in Calgary. She recently shared with BCN's Jeanette Rocher that Canadians are protected by the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms of not having to receive the COVID-19 vaccine.
I think the strongest footing we have against governments is under Section 7, that we should not be forced. I mean, Section 7 was at play with the euthanasia debate. It's been at play with the abortion debate. It's that my body, my choice extends past ideas about specific medical treatments like abortion, but many would say that includes that applies to any medical treatment, that we should be able to decide. The government shouldn't decide for us. And Jeanette, what I'm worried about is this idea that today that may be right for one sector of the population and not the other, but tomorrow, are we going to like it when the government steps in to tell us what to do with another medical choice?
Community members, along with Lethbridge City staff, gathered outside of Lethbridge City Hall on Monday morning to permanently raise the Blackfoot Confederacy flag. The flag is another step for truth and reconciliation commitments made by the city. The flag raising kicks off a week of celebrations in honor of Reconciliation Week.
The flag raising is one part. Reconciliation, however, is about all of us coming together and addressing those complex issues. We can move to having flags, t-shirts, ribbons, but the hard work is bringing about equality for all, bringing about a place where Indigenous people can feel at home in this community and in this territory, and being recognized and represented as we are traditionally.
Truth and Reconciliation Day falls on September 30th. For a full list of activities and events, you can visit the City of Lethbridge's website. The federal election campaign is on many people's minds right now, but in Lethbridge, we still have a municipal election coming up on October the 18th. Another name has come forward for a seat on Lethbridge City Council, and that name is Harold Perversa. He says he is running because he wants a safe community for families and businesses.
Safe communities are realistic, and we can achieve them. My motto for this election has been stop, look, listen, and then proceed. None of this knee-jerk reactions are required at City Council. I mean, we should be educated, prepared, and involved in the community. You know, it's out of place really to have citizens having to go to City Hall and protest before City Council even makes a recognition of that there is an issue. And I don't apologize for being part of those protests and trying to make the community voices heard, you know, at City Hall.
There is one Lethbridge City Councillor candidate who appears to have quite the past. Information provided by the Nova Scotia Public Prosecution Service says that Bradley Lawrence Whalen, also known as Bradley Patrick Allen Sampson, was convicted of 8 different offences and sentenced in 2006 to more than 3 years in prison. Whalen was arrested and charged with child luring and sentenced to 6 months in jail. He was also convicted of robbery for stealing from a bowling alley in Nova Scotia in 2004, receiving 3 years on that charge. As of our broadcast day and time, Bradley Whalen's name is still on the City of Lethbridge website as a City Councillor candidate. Sheldon Kennedy is best known for his time as an NHL player with the Detroit Red Wings and the Calgary Flames in the late 80s and mid-90s. Now, during his hockey career, he battled other players on the ice, but these days, he's fighting a different kind of battle. Kennedy was at Lethbridge College today, sharing his vision of how to eliminate bullying, abuse, harassment, and discrimination. Kennedy is also known for coming forward and saying that his former hockey coach, Graham James, sexually abused him.
All I knew is that if I didn't deal with it and face it and address it and try to work through it to get better, that it was always going to impact my life in a very, very negative way, and I'll never be who I want to be. So my goal is to be the best dad, best father, best person that I can be, not only for our family, but in the community. And that takes a consistent work on my part on a daily basis to be better. And I think that one thing we've learned about the impact of trauma from people that have been hurt in many different ways is that the impact is consistent and it's real.
Sheldon Kennedy is an Order of Canada recipient, which recognizes outstanding dedication to the community and nation of Canada. The 41st annual Terry Fox Run took place over the weekend. The event was originally supposed to be in person, but recent restrictions changed those plans to a virtual format. As Micah Quinn explains, the event is highlighting the legacy of what Terry accomplished 4 decades ago.
And he did it because of his love for everybody else. And that is something I think we could all use these days.
41 years ago, Terry Fox set out to run across Canada to raise money for cancer research after his own diagnosis of the disease. Terry didn't complete his goal, but he instilled a sense of pride in Canadians like never before. One of the co-chairs for the Lethbridge Terry Fox Run, Bobby Fox, says Terry represents humility and humanity.
You know, what would Terry do if he was faced with this kind of adversity dealing with COVID? And he would just push forward. And I think that's what resonates with myself and with so many Canadians across this country.
The goal for the Lethbridge Terry Fox Run this year is to raise $20,000, and the online donation page will be open until the first week of October.
We do understand that this year everybody is stressed out and has other things to think about, and you have to put your family first, and we accept that, but we want to just do what we can for the Terry Fox Foundation this year and come back bigger and better than ever next year.
A new app was created so runners can track their donations and see how the Lethbridge Run is doing.
And we're hoping that as we move forward, that more and more of what we do is going to become more and more digital, just to kind of help keep things a little more organized, a little bit easier for everybody to use.
$850 million has been raised for the Terry Fox Run since its inception in 1980. You can donate to the Lethbridge Terry Fox Run by visiting at Lethbridge Terry Fox Run on Facebook. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
More than 1,000 people took part in a freedom rally in Calgary over the weekend, with PPC leader Maxime Bernier in attendance. The protesters directed their anger in equal parts to the federal and provincial governments over COVID-19 restrictions. Bernier told the crowd of supporters that the People's Party of Canada is the only national political party speaking out against COVID-19 vaccination passports and mask mandates. This was Bernier's third stop in Alberta during the federal election campaign. A recent Leger poll showed that 23% of Albertans are opposed to a vaccine passport system, and Bernier was hoping to capture the support of those voters. Saskatchewan residents can now download a digital QR code to prove that they've been vaccinated against COVID-19. The code can be downloaded or printed from people's e-health accounts. The government says it replaces the vaccination record that was made available in August but did not include a digital format. Officials announced last week that proof of vaccination will be required at non-essential businesses, including restaurants, movie theaters, and indoor sports venues beginning on October the 1st. Students at Western University in Ontario walked out of class recently to protest what they describe as a culture of misogyny on campus. Police in London, Ontario are investigating after 4 women came forward with allegations that they were sexually assaulted on campus during the school's orientation week. A student spokesperson also called out the school's president, Professor Alan Shepard.
Western says it protects its students, but the numbers say otherwise. 30+ girls would say otherwise. Over the past few days, I've been asked to not confirm any numbers to the media aside from the 4 formal complaints. I want to take this time to remind everyone that the vast majority of sexual assaults are not reported. The vast majority of reported sexual assaults do not result in criminal charges. The system works against survivors. The survivors of this past week do not need to subject themselves to a cruel and unjust procedure in order for their experiences to be real. Alan Shepard has said our campus is safe. Safe for who? Alan Shepard, do you know what it's like to be unsafe? Not just feel unsafe, but actually be unsafe where you live. Do you know what it's like to walk past the site? Do you know what it's like to walk past the site of the most traumatic experience of your life every day just to get to class?
The persecution of Christians is on the rise in Nigeria. Christians, however, are receiving some hope through trauma care provided by Open Doors. In this next story, we hear about how one woman was helped to experience the power of forgiveness despite witnessing the murder of her husband and son.
God is doing an amazing work at Shalom Center and with the trauma care programs that we're doing here in a way that we're amazed, and we know this is not us. It's not about our knowledge, about our skills, but about God. As I talk to you, a testimony of this lady that came, her husband was killed, her son was killed right in her front. Because of the traumatic incidents that happened to her, she used to be a chorister, a singer. She sings in the church, she sings in the choir. She was the choir mistress. But she lost her singing voice and she lost her dancing step. Now, if you ever worship in an African church, worship is never complete unless we sing a lot and dance a lot. This woman wouldn't sing and dance anymore. And we heard of her. We sent for her. She came to Shalom. And by the fifth day, we talked about forgiveness. It was very, very hard for her to come to terms and say, yes, I'm willing to forgive these people that killed my husband and my son. But with loving encouragement and prayers, she was able to come to that state of forgiveness, of release, of letting go. It was quite painful for her to even let go. She was weeping, we were weeping. And of course, we shed a lot of tears there. But this is the beautiful side of the story. When she did that around mid-afternoon, by late evening, she discovered she was singing for the first time in like 3 or 4 years, which was just so amazing. And she turned to the other fellow survivors and said, look, I can't believe I'm singing. And she was just singing, and everybody would just join her to sing and dance. And we sang and we danced deep into the night. What an amazing miracle. And she went back home a different person. We keep getting phone calls from her people. What did you do to this woman? What did you do to this woman? All we can tell them is God and the loving care of people in a center called Shalom Care Center. And we have many of those kind of stories that we can just keep sharing and sharing,
Well, it felt a lot like fall today with slightly cooler temperatures across much of southwestern Alberta, but you may need the AC once again later this week as it'll begin to feel like summer once again. Full weather details are coming up. Well, we had sunshine mixed with clouds today, and it felt a little bit like autumn as well, but that will change. Jeanette Roche is here now with a complete look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, at our house, we're switching the thermostat between heat and cool, and maybe later this week, we'll need that AC once again.
Yeah, the same thing's happening over at my house too, and I think that's pretty typical these days with those chilly mornings. But you did mention later on this week seeing some change in temperature. We are going to see higher temperatures, especially towards the weekend as we get into the more upper 20s. So looking forward to that. Into our Tuesday tomorrow, sunshine, 22 the high, looking at a west wind at 30 gusting to 50 at times into Wednesday. Also 22, mix of sun and clouds, sunshine on Thursday, high of only 14 degrees, and then climbing up to 21 for Friday under sunny skies. Then we're going to see that lovely 27-degree day on Saturday with a mix of sun and cloud, and then high of 22 on Sunday. So we are kind of seeing temperatures a little bit all over the place. Sometimes we're higher than that average high, sometimes lower. By the way, average high for this time of year is 19 degrees, average low 4 degrees. On this day back in 1938, we had our hottest day on record, which was 31 degrees. And in 1995, we had our chilliest, which was only -6. 7:15 is when the sun rose this morning, and our sunset this evening, 7:34, giving us just a little more than 12 hours of daylight. Day's definitely getting shorter as we are certainly approaching that autumn solstice coming up actually on Wednesday. Lots of sunshine on the coast tomorrow, 19 in both Vancouver and Victoria, seeing some winds in the Juan de Fuca Straits. 22 the high in Edmonton tomorrow, 23 in Calgary. Both of those cities seeing more clouds in the morning and then clearing up more in the afternoon there. Saskatoon and Regina looking at 20 degrees, lots of sunshine there. A bit of fog tomorrow in Saskatoon, 20 winds in both of those cities. Over in Winnipeg though, sunshine, 19 degrees, a little bit more wind, 30 to 50 kilometer per hour winds. 40% chance of showers tomorrow in Toronto with a 20 to 40 wind. At 24 degrees though, the high, not so bad. 24 also in Ottawa with a mix of sun and cloud, looking a little bit more windy there too, 30 to 50 winds. Beautiful day expected tomorrow in Montreal, sunshine and 25 degrees. Looking to the east coast at 23 in Fredericton with lots of sunshine, beautiful sunny blue skies as well for Halifax, 21 the high, 22 in Charlottetown. In St. John's, put your plants in tonight because we're looking at a frost advisory in effect for early Tuesday morning in lower lying areas, seeing temperatures -2 to +2, but then should be sunny for the rest of the day, high of 15. There you go. There is your weather forecast.
Stocks slumped today in a broad sell-off that extends an already weak streak for major indexes. Worries about debt-engorged Chinese property developers and the damage they could do to investors worldwide if they default are rippling across the markets. The S&P 500 fell 1.5% earlier today, following 2 weeks of losses that left it on track for its first monthly decline since January. The Dow also fell 1.5%, while the Nasdaq dropped 1.7%. Markets were also down in Europe, and Hong Kong's main index dropped 3.3%. Cineplex CEO Ellis Jacob is expected to testify this week in the company's court case against Cineworld Group plc. The Toronto-based Cineplex is seeking $2.18 billion in damages after the UK theatre giant walked away from its December 29 deal to take over Cineplex amid a strict COVID-19 lockdown in June of 2020. Pfizer says its COVID-19 vaccine works for kids age 5 through 11. The vaccine maker says the finding is based on a study of a lower dose of its 2-dose vaccine in more than 2,200 kindergarten and elementary school-aged kids. It says it plans to seek authorization for this age group soon in the United States, Britain, and Europe. No word yet on Canada. The vaccine made by Pfizer and its German partner BioNTech is currently only approved for those 12 and older. Many parents are awaiting vaccinations for their younger children. Computer maker HP, Procter & Gamble, and coffee company Nespresso have joined a corporate pledge to sharply cut their greenhouse gas emissions over the next 20 years. The Climate Pledge is a grouping of companies and organizations spearheaded by Amazon. It says it has signed up 86 new members for its voluntary measures. The group says it now has 201 members with annual global revenues of more than $1.8 trillion. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was down 335 points in the day to 20,155. The Dow was down 614 points to 33,970. The S&P 500 was down 75 points to 4358. And the Nasdaq was down 330 on the day to 14,714. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down $1.68 to $70.29 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 12 cents to $4.99 US. Gold was down 12 cents to finish at $17.64.04 US an ounce. And silver was even at $22.27 US an ounce. Wheat is at $11.10 per bushel. Barley's at $8.82. Canola's at $19.57, and corn is at $10.92 per bushel. Live cattle were down 3 cents to $122.78. Feeder cattle were up 30 cents to $156.68, and lean hogs were down 75 cents to $84.98. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 78.01 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, the Alberta government announced today that the Restrictions Exemption Program is underway. This allows fully vaccinated Albertans or those with a recent negative COVID-19 test to access participating businesses and events across the province. How should the church reach out to the community during uncertain times, especially during a pandemic? The senior pastor with My Victory Church, Kelly Stickle, will have some thoughts for us in just a moment.
Well, today's Canada has become increasingly more secular, with religion and faith issues falling to the wayside as being of minor importance. Our guest today believes one way of bringing about some change to this is for the church to become more involved in our communities. Kelly Stickle joins us. He is the lead pastor of My Victory in Lethbridge. Pastor Kelly, welcome. So great to have you back on again.
Thanks, Jeanette. It's great to be with you.
Awesome. So, Pastor Kelly, times have changed. Obviously, 100 years ago or so, the local church used to be the community hub, that community gathering hub, so to speak. Not so much these days. So, do you think that people who don't regularly attend church tend to drive by a church building and maybe see it as a them versus us mentality? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't know that a lot of people driving by a church building pay all that much attention to the church building. I think more than them thinking us versus them, I think they're probably just thinking irrelevant. Like it's not relevant to them. It's not relevant in society. And if anything, lately with all the stuff that's come out, residential schools and all the other things in the media, they're probably looking, saying like, not only are we irrelevant as the church, but also they look at it as even a negativity aspect to the community. And so that's something that I think is alarming, and something that we need to be very aware of as those of us in the church and do something about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you raise a very interesting point there. Now, I understand that some churches are now trying to restore that community feeling by doing things like setting up a laundromat at the church for anyone to come by and use at no charge. I know there's a church in Calgary that's opened up a coffee shop there. They're just trying to be more inclusive, I think, to the community as well. So basically trying to meet some practical needs for the neighborhood. I really love this idea. So how effective do you think this is?
I think it's really effective. I think that we as the church need to realize that we're expecting people just to walk through the door when they're, and address their spiritual needs is not something that is likely to happen, that there's a lot of other things that we need to think about. And I think we need to take our cue from how Jesus did ministry. When Jesus showed up in towns, he healed the sick, he fed the hungry, he ministered to felt needs often before he ever preached. And I think in many ways, I think that as the church, we need to realize that, hey, we're not just a church is not just a place we attend, it's who we are. And if we want to have an impact in our community, we need to be the hands and feet of Jesus to our cities.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, can you tell us a bit about your church reaching out to the community through the My City Care program?
Yeah, a number of years ago, I preached a message, through a series actually through December, and I preached through Matthew 25, where Jesus said, "When I was hungry, you fed me; when I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink; when I was naked, you clothed me; when I was in prison, you visited me." And in that passage, he listed, 6 human needs that are surprisingly 2,000 years later are still the 6 most predominant human needs in our society, being, food and water, clothing, housing, healthcare, justice. These are the 6, still the 6 greatest needs in our community. And I challenged our church and I said, Jesus wasn't addressing the Red Cross to meet all these needs. He wasn't addressing the government to meet all these needs. He was addressing his followers. He was addressing us as the church. And what would happen, just pose the question, what would happen if we as a church took on these 6 needs and said, okay, we're going to become the center of hope. We're going to meet these 6 needs in our community. What would change? And I think COVID revealed a lot of things where I think a lot of our society is looking to the government to meet their needs and are being let down because that's not the government's job. And we've relegated, I think, our job as the church to the government, to the Red Cross, to other organizations, where I think it's time to take our job back. And so I really challenged our church, let's take our job back. Let's find the needs in our community, identify those 6 needs, and what can we do to meet them? And out of that, a number of people in our church, spearheaded by, Jen Tribble, who's the head of our My City Care, we birthed My City Care, and we've been doing it to the point where throughout COVID, actually the government came to us, the provincial government came to us and said, we can't feed the people in the city. We want you to, and here's some money to be able to do that. And we ended up feeding in the neighborhood of like 50,000 people meals, or 50,000 meals that went out in a period of 3 months, and going, okay, that's our job. That's what we're supposed to do.
And you guys have teamed up with the food bank on this and different organizations as well, right?
Yeah, we partner with the food bank, and we partner with a number of other organizations in the community. A lot of them, we're all on the same team. So it's not just us doing it, but I think coming alongside a lot of these agencies that are doing the work. We're not trying to replace anybody. We're just coming alongside and doing the work and helping out where they need. And a lot of the agencies in the community just don't have the volunteer base that they used to, and are missing that. So we've stepped up and said, okay, we want to send volunteers to help out and do whatever we can to meet the needs, whatever the need is in the community. Let's take our job, let's do it. And as a church, if we can meet the felt needs, it's amazing how people open up and are ready to hear the gospel. And we've seen a lot of salvations, a lot of people come to Christ because we fed them, we fed their family, or we clothed them, or we helped them in one way or another, and all of a sudden now they're open to the gospel.
And what kind of feedback have you been getting from the community about this? It sounds amazing.
Yeah, well, the feedback's been incredible, and a lot of times the initial feedback is, quite honestly, is like, are you associated with a church? Are you a church? We named it My City Care because we didn't want to attach it to a church or to our church. And so when people find out it's attached to a church, then their initial reaction is, okay, what do you want? And we're like, we don't have any strings attached. We're just wanting to meet needs and not having any expectations.
Yeah, no agenda.
That. And I think a lot of times the initial reaction is sometimes negative when they find out it's attached to a church. But then when they see that there are no strings attached and that we're really helping it, the feedback's been very, very positive. From the individuals we're helping, the agencies we're partnering with, the municipality, like the municipal government, the provincial government, and even we've had the federal government make comments and different things too. So it's been, the response has been overwhelming. It's been really good. Yeah,
it's interesting that they would think that there was an agenda attached to that. It's funny that you say that. So I know that, with some, the tendency is for churches to stay within their four walls rather than going out to connect with their neighbors. But so what advice would you have for church leaders to perhaps overcome those fears or mindsets that would stop them from doing this?
Well, I think, COVID and all of the, things being shut down, and I think it's caused us as pastors, as leaders, to really reevaluate church. And when we're not able to have a weekend service, I think it caused us to reevaluate and going, okay, have we overemphasized the weekend gathering and underemphasized what we do throughout the week? And I think it's caused us to reevaluate as pastors and leaders to go, is the church a place to attend, or are we the church? And I think I'd challenge every pastor and leader and churchgoer to go, hey, church is not just a place we go to. It's not a building that we attend. It's not a service one day a week. We're called to be the church. Jesus called us to be the church. And part of that activity of being the church is to be the hands and feet of Jesus to our community. And we're not called to minister to people and expect them to come to us. Jesus said, go. And he told us to go to them. And I think that'd be my challenge, is like, I think this is the best way we can go is back in the day, we went with tracts and we knocked on doors and we invited people to respond to the gospel. And that doesn't work anymore in today's society. And I think it probably repulses more than it actually helps. But I think going and being the hands and feet of Jesus and ministering to needs and meeting needs like Jesus told us in Matthew 25, I think is the most effective way. And I'd encourage all the churches to be involved. And we have a vision. We've been partnering with the church in Medicine Hat, for instance. That's not our church. They just said, hey, could we do that here? We're like, yes. And we've been partnering with them. And My City Care has been set up in Medicine Hat, and it has no attachment to our church. It's another church doing it. And we want to help other churches do that as well. Just as, like, where do we start? Well, we have a plan. Let's partner and let's see if we can't activate the church to be the hands and feet of Jesus in our community.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes perfect sense because it's not a competition like your church versus their church. Like you said, it's all one, right? What about people that don't feel comfortable coming to church? Like say somebody's divorced, they might feel they are not welcome there, for example. So is there a place for the church to offer to help people going through tough situations like this?
Again, Jesus said go, and so we've set up a separate office downtown, my city care, and for people just like that who might not be comfortable to come through a church doors. Or we've had people walk through our doors to get help, and they come in terrified and thinking lightning's going to strike if they walk through the doors, which of course we know that's not going to happen, and Jesus accepts everybody. But I find it a lot easier to set up that separate office, something where and we meet a lot of people there who would not be comfortable to step into a church as of yet. And maybe because of past hurts or past experiences, or where they feel like they're going to be judged, or their own, guilt or shame that they feel like nobody else is going to love on them. And they're surprised when we do. I think Jesus went to Zacchaeus' house because Zacchaeus didn't feel comfortable to go to the synagogue because he felt he was going to be judged. And Jesus met the adulterous woman on the street because, again, she was being judged in there, or felt like she was going to be judged as well. But I think as a church, like, we got to find ways that we can go. There's multiple ways that we can go without and minister to the people that we might not necessarily reach on a Sunday morning.
Yeah, well, let me ask you this, Pastor Kelly. So, of course, some people might think church people are too judgy against certain marginalized members of society. Can you offer maybe any advice on how you can help or welcome people if they're part of LGBTQ community or a family member of someone who's in that group, who's maybe struggling?
Well, we're getting into very touchy things because, honestly, the church has been very judgy in many ways, and I think we got to be careful about who we're judging. And again, we got to take our cue from Jesus. We're the body of Christ, and take our cue from Jesus. And how Jesus ministered is he ministered. John said this in John 1, that he ministered with grace and truth. But it's interesting to me that who he ministered grace to, where he gave grace and where he gave truth. And he gave a lot of grace to the marginalized, to the outcast, to, at the time, of his time, the LGBT community were the tax collectors. There were sinners, and then there was tax collectors. They weren't even good enough to be listed with the sinners. They were another level of outcast. And yet Jesus went to Matthew and said, "Follow me." And he went and had a meal with Zacchaeus, and he went out of his way to welcome and offer grace where the church was offering, at that time, the Pharisees in the synagogue, and the church was offering judgment, and he offered grace. But then to the church leaders who should have known better and were preaching the gospel, then he spoke very strong words of truth. And so I think we need, as a church, take our cue from Jesus and offer grace and throw out the welcome mat and love everybody regardless of where they're at, and just believe that a relationship with Jesus is going to bring life change, and it can bring hope and bring life change. And that's not our job to judge. The Holy Spirit is the convictor, not us. So I think we need to do whatever we possibly can to offer grace and welcome anybody and everybody where they're at, and make sure that our churches are doing the same.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right about that, because I know the stats are high for people, certain groups leaving the church because they feel not welcomed or not loved or not judged. So I think it's important to show these people how much love they actually do deserve as well, and that to remind them how much God loves them. Absolutely. So I know I have a lot of questions to get through here, but we're running out of time, unfortunately, Pastor Kelly. It's always so interesting and enlightening to talk to you. But thank you so much, Pastor Kelly, for being with us today. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much. My pleasure, Janet.
Our society has been undergoing a lot of change over the last number of years, and one of those changes has been labeled as cancel culture. Now, when people or businesses choose to oppose what is considered politically correct, they're then canceled, shut down on social media sites, fired, or even ostracized in some manner. How are we as Christians supposed to respond to this? Joining us now to talk about this in further detail is Joe Dallas. He's a conference speaker and directs a biblical counseling ministry for those dealing with sexual and relational problems. His latest book is called Christians in a Cancel Culture and is available at joedallas.com. Joe, welcome back to Bridge City News.
Hey, thank you for having me, Hal. Good to see you.
You too, Joe. Now, you start out by saying that our culture is embracing a new world vision. Can you explain?
Yeah, it's the vision of a crusade. From my perspective, we got a crusade going on that is basically fueled by the cultural elites and voices, news media, entertainment industry, academia, psychiatric industry, and all of them have basically linked arms to fuel a basic crusade to convert us. And that converting us means basically converting our understanding of marriage, sexuality, life in the womb, racism, social justice. And like all crusades, it's got the goal of either converting the infidels or silencing the infidels. And in this case, the infidels are those of us who hold to traditional Judeo-Christian positions on these issues. And I think the irony of this is, Hal, I don't know any Christian who wanted to start a fight. I mean, we have generally had what you would call a live and let live attitude, but the culture seems to be saying, well, we have shifted in our views, so now it's your turn to shift as well. And with our backs against the wall, we're saying pretty much what Peter said when he was commanded not to preach in the name of Jesus. And he replied, well, hey, whether or not it's right to obey you over God, you decide. But for my part, I can't go where you want me to go. I have to speak what I have seen and heard. So I think this is where we are. We are not interested in fighting a battle, but we are interested in defending what we believe and defending our right to express what we believe. That we are interested in.
So many people like you agree, Joe, that the pendulum has swung way far way to the left. How can we bring it back more to the center or even back to the right?
I'm not sure that we are going to see the pendulum swing back toward the center or to the right. Of course, I've got my druthers as a social conservative as well as a doctrinal conservative. I would love to see that happen. But regardless, we have to remember what our primary responsibility is. It is to be the voice of the ambassador. The ambassador is sent by the sender with a message of reconciliation. In our case, it's a message of reconciliation to God. That we have to keep in mind, because regardless of the way the political pendulum is swinging, we have to stay faithful to our initial calling. Now, having said that, I think the irony is this. We probably could see a shift towards more conservative policies if we do emphasize the need to first live according to Judeo-biblical principles ourselves and be consistent and thereby establish more credibility, and then learn to more reasonably express those principles. Because I really believe one of the reasons we've seen the social, cultural, political pendulum swing to the left is because so many people from the left have cleverly convinced the public that Bible-believing Christians are haters. And instead of just saying, oh, no, we're not, that's wrong, we love all people, I think we're at a time now we need to learn to reason with people more and start asking the relevant questions, such as, how do you define hatred? How do you feel my speech and my mannerisms make me a hateful person? How do you determine what is justice? And how do you determine that what I am doing or teaching is unjust? I think we need to get better at conversations, and I think we need to get better at reasoning with people as apologists would do. I really think this is the season of the apologist. We always need the preacher, we always need the evangelist and the teacher, we always will. But I think we need more believers to take the responsibility of learning how to have reasonable discussions with people, family members, friends, co-workers, whereby we explain and then defend the basics of the faith and what our faith teaches us about the human experience, including marriage, sexuality, life within the womb, and social justice. because I think at a grassroots level that can and does effect change, and change of that sort absolutely can swing the pendulum more towards the center or even towards the right. That's not the ultimate goal, that's not the top goal, but it sure would be nice to see that happen, I gotta say.
You know, Joe, what I find very interesting as well on Twitter, we spend a lot of time on Twitter with Bridge City News, and I see these nameless and faceless accounts, you know, people who are trolling on Twitter, and it says right beside their Twitter profile, love is love, I can't stand hatred, I have no time for hatred. And then I read their tweets and it's all filled with vitriol and hatred towards the right and Christianity. So I call them out on it. I'll do a screen capture and I'll tweet it to them saying, I thought you were against hatred. What's with all this hatred? And then I never hear a thing after that, or maybe I'm blocked. Now, Joe, the last few decades, the left has pushed for tolerance and diversity, but you suggest that they may no longer be the primary issues.
Well, you probably remember all those sweet bumper stickers we saw for years that said coexist, and it had symbols of different religions and worldviews, and the idea was let's all try to get along. Now, I'm all over that. I think that's a great idea. Paul told the Romans, as much as lieth within you, live peaceably with all people. So I absolutely believe that we should be the best, the most tolerant, the most reasonable and respectful of all citizens. Christians should be all of that. But that's really not what this movement is about. It's not about tolerance. It's actually a new form of Puritanism. It's basically a form of Puritanism that says, if people do not believe our orthodoxy about what society should be like, that alone makes them so repugnant, so evil, that they are not worthy of the same consideration we would show other people. It's a lot like Orwell's Animal Farm. All animals are created equal, but some animals are more equal than others. Well, we who hold traditional conservative views, we are the less equal animals. And you'll notice the way the left has treated social or theological conservatives. The rules of common engagement do not apply when it comes to us. They really don't. It's okay to speak to us the way you wouldn't speak to other people, just as on Twitter, people feel it's perfectly okay to say horrible things to people that you would not normally say to people, but if it's those conservatives, that is allowable. In fact, in my book, I try to point out in one chapter called Starring You, that this is how Hitler basically opened up the door for wide-scale persecution of Jews. I don't want to compare us to Jews in the Holocaust, but I do want to point out that the propaganda techniques being used today are very similar to what Hitler used when he was basically re-indoctrinating the German people to believe that the rights afforded most people should not be afforded to Jewish people. We are seeing a repeat of that today.
So how is misinterpretation a tactic of some who promote cancel culture? How does it really work, Joe?
Well, misinterpretation is a pretty clever tactic because basically it teaches people how to take what you say and do and translate it into something else. So if I say, for example, I believe marriage is heterosexual in nature, somebody can then say, I heard Joe Dallas talk and he hates gays. Well, if Joe Dallas hates gays, Joe Dallas is a jerk. If Joe Dallas is a jerk, Joe Dallas should be silenced. Let's pass a law against Joe Dallas. That's how it works. All you have to do is twist what someone is saying into something that will get people excited. Now, Hal, as you know, if you just say, I think that group is stupid, I think they are weird, I think they are wrong, nobody's going to get all stirred up about that. Why should they? But if you say that group is dangerous, that group causes damage to society, that group hurts people, now people are going to say, oh, well then, we need to pass codes against those people. We need to silence those people. We need to come against those people because nobody wants their children endangered. For that matter, nobody wants their gay friends endangered or their transgendered friends endangered. And so if you can convince the public that a traditional conservative reading of Scripture leads to dangerous practices, then the public will be behind you when you start passing laws against conservative Christians, laws that stifle their freedom of speech or stifle their freedom of religion. Nobody is going to defend a bigot. I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure that I would. So if the American Nazi Party moved into my area and set up a shop, I would be so disgusted that if somebody burned that shop down, I probably wouldn't shed any tears. Well, that's how the public is being convinced to come against us. They're being convinced that we are basically in the same category as Nazis. It works.
You know, that actually brings up another interesting point. Can you share some of the points you actually make in your chapter, Why the Hostility?
I point out there seem to be three primary reasons. One has to do with convenience. When people hold a biblical viewpoint on life, marriage, sexuality, racial justice, or the means to salvation, they will become an inconvenience to groups who want to promote different viewpoints on those issues. So whenever the gospel is manifest or preached or expressed, somebody will be inconvenienced. We certainly saw that when Jesus was preaching and teaching, and much of what he taught was an inconvenience to the scribes and the Pharisees. It certainly challenged their beliefs and their powers. And I think that today, much of what we teach and preach as believers is an inconvenience to the transgender movement, the gay rights movement, the pro-abortion movement, not because we're trying to make trouble, but because we hold definitions and beliefs that are inconvenient to their goals. Their goals are to convert the public to a new way of thinking. We are preaching a different way of thinking. That makes us inconvenient. That's one problem. Another is a problem of conscience. Oftentimes, if you take a stand for something, you cannot help but also be taking a stand against something. If I am for the life in the womb, I have to be against abortion. If I am for the concept of individual responsibility, then I am going to be against the critical race theory, which holds an entire race accountable for the sins of ancestors rather than holding individuals accountable. Now, if people are pricked in their conscience by what you are saying, they have to make a decision. Either they will just ignore you, or they will yield to what their conscience is telling them, or they will try to silence the person who is saying what their conscience is also saying. Full disclosure, Hal, I spent about 6 years as a gay activist in the late 70s, early 80s. And during those years, I was trying to convince myself that God approved of my sexuality and the way I was expressing it. Whenever I heard a Christian say something contrary to that, I wanted to silence that Christian because I was hearing from that Christian what I was trying to ignore from my own conscience. And this, I think, is what got Stephen killed when he preached a terrific sermon that indicted Jewish leadership for the killing of the Messiah. Well, they were, according to Luke's account, pierced in their own conscience, and so they attacked him and killed him. And finally, then there is the issue of conviction. I mean, true conviction. There are true believers. There are people who really are convinced that the traditional Christian viewpoint, the biblical viewpoint on these issues, is dangerous and should be stopped. Now, they're wrong, of course, but they are very sincere, though sincerely wrong. They're as sincere as Taliban fighters who destroy lives in the name of what they believe. Saul of Tarsus was a true believer, wasn't he? I mean, he certainly believed in his cause, even though he was completely wrong. So I think you have those three elements, but let me add one more while we're talking about it, and that is the need many people have for a cause. There's conviction and there's conscience and there's convenience, but there's also cause. I really believe, Hal, that people, especially young people, are hungry for a cause which is noble, a cause in which you fight the oppressor and fight for the oppressed. And people are so hungry for that if you tell them, okay, I have a cause for you, the Christian church is full of hateful people who preach hateful things. And as a result of their hateful preaching, gays and lesbians are hurt, transgenders are hurt, women are hurt, racial minorities are hurt, people are hurt. Well, people who are susceptible will say, okay, sign me up for that cause. I will come against the church. I will come against Bible-believing Christians because they are the oppressors and I want to defend the oppressed. And I think that is happening because this is a time of real intellectual laziness. I mean, people just do not check things out. They jump on bandwagons without examining the claims of the bandwagon. And because of that, I think a lot of people are jumping on the cancel culture bandwagon without really checking out whether or not its claims are valid, all because they are so anxious to be part of a noble cause. They have not taken the time to examine whether or not the cause is really noble. That's why I think we see the hostility we see today.
Joe Dallas is the author of Christians in a Cancel Culture, and you can pick up his book at joedallas.com. Joe, thanks for joining us today from California.
A real pleasure. Thank you for having me, Hal.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks for watching.